of all, and servant of all. Then he took a child and set him in the midst of them, and when he had taken him in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me, but whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me.
So imagine the disciples. Jesus was about to be crucified, and they were all worried about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It's just a window into the reality that they were still very much carnal. The fact that they did not realize what kind of kingdom was going to come, that is going to be spiritual kingdom. That was not going to be some kind of kingdom here on earth. They really thought there's going to be a real physical kingdom here on earth. And then they were thinking, who's going to be the greatest? Very sad, but it is important for us to learn from this, knowing that the lesson that Jesus gives when he says that really the one that is, what does he say here? So Jesus said that if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. So very important for us when we are battling with our ego, thinking that we should be better than others, to remember what Jesus said here. Being a servant, that's really what it's all about. And this thought is repeated several times throughout the gospel. But let's please turn the page. I know that we are a little bit behind in how far we should be, because we are going a little bit slower, although it's very hard, I'll tell you, to go very fast to the Gospels. But let's please turn a few more pages to the right, and I want us to read on page 1182 an event here that Jesus intervenes regarding the adulteress that faced that accusation. So let's please read a couple of volunteers from verses 1 through 6. 1 through 6 first, please, somebody. 1 through 6. Go ahead, Kay.
But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that you should be stoned. But what do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear.
So first of all, there's so many problems with this instance here. Few that I would mention. First of all, apparently they caught her right in the act. But the question is, why did they bring her alone? Why didn't they bring the man too? Why were they just picking on her? Maybe because she was weaker. The other person maybe was able to run away. But and also the fact that they brought her to him just to accuse him. That was the only reason. It's not that somehow they're just concerned about her spiritual well-being. And then let's see how Jesus responded. Jesus initially doesn't even seem to pay attention to them, because of course he sensed their how do you call it? They're trying to accuse him. They're trying to catch him, right? Let's please read what Jesus' response is, verses 7 through just 7 through the end of this section here, verse 10. Who wants to read this? Go ahead,
So when
Aaron.
they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last, and Jesus was left alone. And the woman standing in the midst, when Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more.
So we see here a marvelous display of the wisdom of Jesus, how he put it back on them and how they came to their own senses. Rhett?
You know, I understand the love and the mercy of Jesus.
Yeah.
But Moses did write that in the law.
Well, that certainly
He
is
didn't deny that.
right.
He just said, okay, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Let's go with
Yes.
that. And whoever was without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone.
Right.
I'm just amazed that they were actually convicted in their conscience after all they were trying to do in the first place.
Right.
And yet, Jesus does not deny the fact that, yeah, you're right. She caught in adultery.
Mhm.
She stoned to death.
Right.
And yes, she was.
That's a good point, Rhett. I'm sorry, Barrett.
Yeah, I think what was happening here is the lack of the man being there. That wasn't their intent at all, because they would have got that. Where was that guy? And I would imagine he was probably part of it.
Well, of course, it takes
He
two.
was probably part of the
Yeah.
ploy to get this whole thing going.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably how debased they were.
Mhm.
But they were just trying to find a way to get at Jesus.
Yeah.
And because, like, otherwise, you're right. They would have drugged the man in there
Mhm,
too, and they would have killed them both.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even have taken it to Jesus in the first
Yes,
place.
exactly. Exactly. They didn't need to do that, but they did that just to test Jesus, to see if they could get him to say something maybe that could accuse him of, or saying, oh yeah, let's make an exception, right? And it's very clever how he responds, that he achieves his objective, yet everybody learns such a strong lesson, right?
Yeah, I love the way he answers questions like this, because just like with taxes, they wanted him to say, no, you shouldn't pay and have a rebellion against Caesar.
Right.
He just simply said, well, I don't know whose description's on there. Give to, them who's,
Yeah.
it's theirs, who cares?
Yeah.
Here the same situation is, yeah, you're right, but go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever's without sin, go ahead and cast the first stone.
Yeah.
And he probably knew their hearts, like Barrett was saying. I mean, obviously it was out of the norm the way that he did this.
Yeah.
But I love
Yeah.
the forgiving, just the mercy that Jesus
Right.
shows.
Right. Right. Absolutely, Barrett.
I think that's how we're supposed to. If we don't do the same thing, it only fuels the argument. If you're just there to prove your point and that you're right, it just makes the situation even worse. If you diffuse the argument,
Yeah.
then it's no longer an argument.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we're supposed to behave in any situation when we're trying to show someone Jesus.
Yeah.
To diffuse, you're not supposed to continue to escalate the situation,
Mm-hmm.
or find where you're wrong and try to accuse him of being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is classic response for Jesus, the fact that he responds with a question. Oftentimes when Jesus is accused or just tested, standard response is respond with a question. And the question sometimes had nothing to do with the question, the Jesus's question. It just asked the question to just kind of distract their attention to something, a bigger picture. And it's really a great strategy, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite question in question with Jesus
Mm-hmm.
when they came to him and said, by what authority do you do these things? And he said, I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, totally.
Baptism of John, was it from men, from heaven, or from men? And that's such a simple answer, and yet they explain why they don't answer because of the fear
Yeah,
and the fact that how could it not be?
yeah,
Even when Jesus did a notable miracle, raising Lazarus from the dead, indeed a notable miracle. Now we need to figure out how to
nothing
go
we can do
forward.
about it, right?
I mean,
Right.
you're talking about abased minds that are just
Yeah. Yeah, and that is really, I think that was really the advantage that Jesus had, because Jesus was able to speak like nobody else. And when you can speak like that, not that anybody could, I mean, it gives you a tremendous advantage. Yes,
another
Red.
thing before we move on.
Right.
Although I believe Jesus knew what he was going to say, he did not respond quickly.
Yeah.
He took his time.
Yeah.
He actually made them wait.
Yeah.
Which probably put a lot of power to
Well,
what he
right, even
basically
more.
said.
That added more,
It's like,
right, Rhett? I mean, Barrett?
This happened this week. It was text message. And I'm like, I'm just not going to respond, and I'll let you think about what was already said. And because you already know the answer. And so if you just continue to respond quickly, it escalates the situation. They're not thinking about anything you said. They're just thinking about how they're right, and they're not really applying scripture. But if you let it just sit,
Yeah.
usually people will consider what was said, and then then you can actually have a conversation that isn't emotion-based.
Yeah.
Emotions get really high. See, Jesus was the ultimate psychologist.
Yeah.
And psychology is how people think. And to get into what is behind why they think this way, you can really respond better.
Right.
Because you can understand where their heart is and where their mind is. And that's when we talked about that last week, when Jesus told them exactly what they was hard to understand. If something is hard to understand, people usually just turn off.
Right.
Because they don't want to hear it.
Right.
Because it goes against what they think and feel.
Right. Absolutely. But to go to the psychology of it, and we will move on, it's true. I mean, Jesus controlled the entire narrative there, what was happening, and even later on when he was accused and brought before various judges and Pilate. And the reason he didn't speak at one point is because if he was going to speak, he was going to get himself out of being crucified, and that was not his purpose. So he just controlled the conversation, the words, really the emotions of people around him in such a way that he was there to accomplish his mission, his purpose that was sent on this earth, and that's exactly what he did. But he could have, by using psychology and the power of words, and absolutely Jesus, if it was in his choice if he chose not to be crucified, that could have happened. But obviously that was God's will for him, therefore he allowed it to happen. So, okay, let's just keep on going. This is the next circumstance is, I would like to read on page 1183 the next event, starting in verse 31. Let's please read 31 to 36. Joy?
Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants, and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free?" Jesus answered them, "Most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed."
They thought, okay, we're going to talk about Abraham. Maybe we can catch him somehow. And Jesus says, you have no idea what you're talking about, because now that you got me talking about Abraham, I have some lesson to teach you. And then, of course, they got kind of offended because Jesus talked about Abraham. And they're already getting to get a little bit uncomfortable. But then in verse 37, let's please read 37 through 41. See what happens next, because it escalates pretty fast here. 37 through 41. Yes, who has the hand up? Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. So, go ahead, Shante. Go ahead.
I know that you are Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me, because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my father. You do what you have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, "Abraham is our father." Jesus said to them, "If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth which I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You do the deeds of your father." Then they said to him, "We were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God."
Okay, so you see, they already get very defensive on what Jesus was saying, and it escalates much quicker. So, Brad, do you want to read, sir, verses 42 through 47? 42 to 47?
Jesus said to them, "If God was your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Which of you convicts me of sin? And if I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears God's words. Therefore, you do not hear, because you are not of God."
Can you imagine how offensive that may have been to them, to say that you are of your father, the devil? Very, very offensive.
It's even worse, he claimed to be God.
Yes,
You can go
exactly.
for that.
Exactly. And they are going to. Just a few verses down further. Rhett?
Sometimes, I mean, he does it in a very nice way, though. I mean, obviously.
Calling them things? Yes.
Yeah, but he sometimes you just have to lay it out there the way it is.
Yeah.
You can dance around it, but you're never going to really
Yeah.
accomplish the goal. I mean, their whole premise from the very beginning is we have never been in bondage to anyone. Boy, do they not know their history.
Exactly.
I mean, all the judges, Babylon, Syrian, I mean,
Right.
go on and on and on, and it's like,
Starting all the way from Egypt, right?
like, you don't remember anything.
Yeah, yeah,
But, you know, he doesn't even talk about that because it's
Yeah.
irrelevant
yeah.
to what he's going to say about their attitude. And sometimes when people, and you get the feeling, okay, they're just going to be confrontational and
Yeah.
not helpful,
Yeah.
in a very nice way, you can just lay it out there exactly the way it
Yeah.
is.
Absolutely, Brad.
You know, when Jesus speaks about
Mm-hmm.
our works, you know, our fruits,
Yes.
there's either good fruit or bad fruit. So he's saying if you're doing the works that like Abraham was doing, that would be the good fruit. But they're not doing what
Yeah.
Abraham said. They're not listening to Jesus. Therefore, your conclusion is bad fruits, and bad fruits are from the devil. So
Yeah.
he's tying everything that he's been saying and teaching and preaching to them, he's tying it all together. And it goes the same with us. If we're producing good works through our faith, then we are
Yeah.
of God. And if we are not, if we are living in the world and doing evil deeds, then we're of the devil.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, they thought they had a much better opinion about themselves, and the fact that you have Abraham there, we have descendants of Abraham. Therefore, that alone was going to make you so much special. It's kind of like that kid that says, "Oh, my father is a elder or a deacon, and then because of him, I'm so special." But that's not how it works. And Jesus takes it even a step further here, because Jesus is going to talk to them even in a more direct way that was going to get them really upset. So verses 48, please somebody read 48 through 59. This ends pretty intense. So 48 through 59. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Then the Jews answered and said to him, "Do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. And I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks and judges. Most assuredly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never see death." Then the Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he shall never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who is dead, and the prophets are dead? Who do you make yourself out to be?"
Who do you think you are? Yes.
Jesus answered, "If I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father who honors me, of whom you say that he is your God. Yet you are not known him, but I know him. And if I say I do not know him, I shall be a liar like you. But I do not know him, I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Then the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by.
You see the intention, the intensity there when Jesus tells them, "I was before Abraham." I mean, that's something different they could not digest, they could not consider.
That escalated very quickly.
That yes. And although it was true, right, they couldn't accept it. Rhett?
I love the way they start out calling them names. You're a Samaritan. I mean,
Yes.
how much more of an insult can it be to a Jew to be called a Samaritan? I mean,
Yeah.
to start with. And, you know, they just escalated as well.
Yeah.
He pretty much puts them in his place.
Yes, absolutely. Right, Barrett?
Yeah, so this is what we do today. You attack the person, and not the principles behind it. So what they call them a Samaritan. It's just an outright. Yeah, I'm just gonna attack you.
Yeah.
They did the same to any politician. They attack the person.
Mm-hmm.
You're a horrible person, and it's not even what he's trying to say. He's trying to give you truth.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to explain what the situation is. It's not the person. We always attack the person.
Yeah.
That's what we do, because it's like, you're stupid. Like, that's not even the point of what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
That's how you fight unfair, and you're not even looking at the principles behind or the teaching and the instruction.
Yeah. Well, Jesus called them name too. He called them liars. I mean, that's not a way to.
Speaking truth.
You would say, right, just absolutely confront them, but Jesus absolutely spoke the truth, and even considering there were consequences, right? I mean, consequences are going to be very dire if he didn't just slip away and just withdraw himself and somehow just hid himself. But sometimes in our life we may be in circumstances like those, that you may say something to somebody and somebody may try to hurt you for it. And obviously it takes a lot of wisdom to know what to say, what not to say, and make sure you have a path of escape when if going gets rough, right? Because you could get physically hurt. And Jesus, as we know, he did get physically hurt. I mean, more than just hurt. They crucified him in the worst possible way, treating him like he was a criminal. So, okay, let's move on forward, okay? So I want us to turn a couple of pages, because again, we are not going to cover everything here. So keep on turning pages, and we're going to talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan on page 1190. I could not skip over this section, 1190. Everybody is very familiar with this, but it is very important for us to refamiliarize ourselves with it. So let's pay attention to what's happening here. Chapter 10, verse 25. So let's please read first from verse 25 to 29. If I can volunteer, 25 to 29. Aaron?
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor?
Just there, thank you. Who is my neighbor? So this is a lawyer, right? Lawyers nowadays, and back of those two, lawyers, it's not easy to really catch a lawyer or kind of get the upper hand on a lawyer. I mean, being a lawyer, they teach you how to argue points and how to get to say things that are in your favor and how to really destroy other people's arguments. And so he really had it together, and then he tries to test him and takes it a little bit further, maybe to justify himself and thinking that he was some kind of big cheese. But let's see how Jesus responds. So we're still in chapter 10, verses 30. 30, let's just read through the whole thing, 37. 30 to 37, Brad.
Then Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked, and passed by the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think the neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
So we understand here what happens. This person was in need, right? And you have a priest, you have a Levite, people that one would expect that they would help, right? You see somebody on the street fell down, what do? You just go on the other side. What kind of compassion, what kind of heart do you have? And then the third one was a Samaritan. And why do you think it's relevant that he was a Samaritan?
Which means don't like someone.
Because Samaritan was like,
They don't intermingle.
yeah, Samaritan was like a second-class citizen back then. And even this Samaritan, what did he do?
Show compassion.
Show compassion. Took him, put him on his horse, transportation, took him to an inn, paid. And then he said, hey, if there's any more, you need to pay you more, I will take care of him. And such an amazing lesson. And he's telling him and he's telling us, go and do likewise. Brad?
I think so too, because back in the beginning, when the lawyer answered, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. So it's God first, and your neighbor the same
Second.
way as you would take
Yeah.
care of yourself and love yourself. And they despise the Samaritan. So it's like they deserve
Yeah.
this love
Yeah.
too. And that I think is one of the big
Yeah.
pieces why he uses a Samaritan is because of that disdain that the Jews
Yeah,
had for
yeah.
him. It shows even the people that you hate are your
Neighbors, yes, indeed, for sure. And the fact that this was done not by a priest or Levi, somebody that had a lot of knowledge, people would expect to act like that with compassion, but by a Samaritan. Right?
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I mean, you have a priest and a Levite, and they just
Yeah.
walk the other way.
Yeah.
Which is so often the case in life. I mean, the people that you would expect that would help don't. And
Yeah.
the ones that you least expect to help are the ones that show up.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, sometimes life lessons are just learned that way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, please.
I just want to point out that last paragraph under the transition, compassion and mercy from the Samaritan. And I like what it says here. Jesus' sole intention had been to say that one's neighbor includes everyone. There would have been no need to identify the actors as a Levite, a priest, and a Samaritan. Jews were also critiquing the heartlessness of those Jews who allowed the law to thwart their humanity. Yeah, I don't know. That stood out to me because he specifies, like you were saying,
Yeah.
Levite, the priest, a
Yeah,
Samaritan.
exactly.
It didn't matter who it was. He would have just said, love everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's your neighbor, right? And who is your closer neighbor is the one that shows compassion and mercy. Sir?
And Jesus cleared it up too, because maybe in his wisdom that we wouldn't understand the difference between a Jew, a Samaritan, and a
Yeah,
Gentile.
yeah.
He's like, love your enemy as yourself. You know,
Right.
he does clear it up it's everybody. that
Yeah,
you come into
yeah,
contact
yeah.
with.
Absolutely. So, lesson for us as we move on to the next event in the ministry of Jesus is to remind ourselves that these moments, I believe, that they are out there much more often. We bump into these events that we would like to admit, and I'll tell you, much too often we are more like the Levite and the priest, trying to just, somebody else gonna do it. Or, I mean, I don't imagine the Levite and the priest said, boy, I'm just an evil person. I hope they, right? It's just, yes.
It always makes me wonder if the person who was beat up was a Samaritan. And maybe that's why it just the thought.
Yeah.
It specifically tells you who came by him, but it doesn't really tell you who he was.
Well, I mean, it doesn't look like the priest said, I wonder if he's a Samaritan. They just, right?
Pulled out his Samaritan card. He's naked. Come on, he doesn't have any.
Yes, how can they tell? Right. So the reality for us, and really for us, that we need to acknowledge that as we go through this short life, we are presented very often with opportunities to be the Good Samaritan, to be the one making a difference, to be the one that helps, as opposed to the one that says somebody else will do it. Because that's really what it would have crossed to the mind of the priest and the Levite. Somebody else will do it. I just don't want to, it's just uncomfortable. A few people had their hand up. Raise your hand up and then go ahead.
Well, in the Gospel of John, when Jesus is in Samaria and he meets a woman at the well, I mean, her very response is, you're talking to
Jews
me.
had nothing to do with, yes,
We don't have, these
Yeah.
kind of communications.
Yeah.
And it was probably more spurred by the Jews than the Samaritans.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know that
yeah.
completely, but the Jews really did have a distaste for Samaritans. So it's kind of
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
that Jesus actually uses this.
the Samaritan, right.
Because it works.
Very good point. Yes, sir.
What's their beef with the Samaritans? I mean, when
Oh.
Samaria was one of the cities, right, that main
Well,
cities
right,
of the
so-
northern tribes.
Right, the beef actually is what made a Samaritan is that they were in a breed, in a half breeds. So if you're a Jew and you married somebody who's not a Jew, you are a Samaritan. That's really why, because they
Even rules that if they touched if a Gentile touched their robe, they would be unclean. That's how deep the prejudice was. They made up rules of their own about how much they hated these people. So it wasn't something that was uncommon. Like, they really did not like each other.
Yeah. Well, whether you like him or not, the lesson was very strong here that even if it is you don't like somebody, you still help them, right? You put yourself in the person's shoes, right?
And one of the things too, when they came out of Babylonian captivity, they were so determined not to break God's law again in such a way that led them into captivity, that they started making up all the boundaries to not break the law, which became the convictions.
Yeah, yeah.
The washing of cups, the washing of hands.
Right.
All these things that, and Jesus, a number of times through the Gospels lays them out as, this isn't God, this is you. And
Yeah.
so we just always have to be careful of that
Yeah.
same thing, because like Joyce said, I mean, here you got a Levite and a priest. Here's this guy. I don't want to touch him.
Yeah.
For whatever reason their excuse was, they didn't want to touch him.
Yeah, yeah. Again, let's just, as we move on from this event, let's just remember that every day there are opportunities that we are presented to make a difference in people's lives. And sometimes we just have to open our eyes. Sometimes we just have to question our excuses. And really, we can all do better when it comes to being a better neighbor, really. Because really it boils down to love God and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So loving your neighbor as yourself, that's a commandment. Just like we are commanded. But how are you going to show that you love your neighbor if you're not going to look for these opportunities to prove? You can say, well, I love my neighbor. Talk is cheap, right? So what are you going to do about it if you indeed love your neighbor? So let's turn the page then, and this is the parable of the rich fool, bottom of page 1192. It starts with a dispute that two brothers had. One brother comes to Jesus and asks him, "Tell my brother to divide his inheritance with me." And Jesus says, "Well, why do you bug me? Who made me an arbitrator over you?" And then Jesus uses that opportunity to tell him, verse 15. Let's please read verse 15, somebody. Who wants to read 15? Barrett?
Then he said to them, beware, be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even one who has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions.
Yeah, very good. New King James says, take heed, and because of covetousness. Covetousness, for one's life does not consist of the abundance of the things he possesses. Right? So many people think that the more you accumulate stuff, right, the one that died with most stuff wins, which is really, really foolish. But let's please read the parable that he's giving, starting in verse 16. 16 to 21, please. Another volunteer, go ahead, please, Shante.
Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.
We see how powerful this parable is. Just in a few verses, Jesus talks about this man that really found himself in such a great position when it comes to physical wealth, right? That says, I don't need anything. For the rest of my life, just take it easy, eat, drink, be happy. Just retire for the rest of your life. Yes?
Would it be different if his mindset was, let me have this ready for my family to be provided for, my children, because we're taught we should have an inheritance left over for those after us.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well, what was his heart then? It was, I just want to be able to relax.
Yeah, it was about himself. It was about himself.
For my family.
Yes. I mean, he didn't think about his family first. He didn't think about helping others. Think about making a difference in people's life. It was just that mindset that Jesus finds issue with. Shante?
I think he's also like, yeah, I did a good job. Like, good job, soul.
Yeah.
You know, I have everything. And
Yes.
And there's a complacency with, giving the glory to God and saying, thank you, God, for giving me all this and all this opportunity. Now I can take a rest. And
Yes.
it's great. I'm still in you, but like
Yeah.
I look at me, I did a pretty good job. Okay, I'm done.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that
I can just relax. Yeah.
God that glory is where with his soul is where that issue is.
Yes, indeed. And really the underlying condition that we all have is just that you have to, it's not about you. I mean, when God blesses you, it's not just you. Maybe you're supposed to help others to make a difference, right? It's not just, and it really isn't you that did that. If the God wouldn't have given you all the gifts and all the resources, that you wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for God, right?
Yeah, this one's always been hard for me to kind of grasp in a positive, negative light, with the exception of the guy says, I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up for many years, which, like you buy houses, you're laying up goods for many years. Your whole goal is to buy more houses, for more income, for many years. Same thing I do. More jobs, more equipment, many years. Joseph, for 7 years, stored it.
Yeah,
stored
for
it,
7
because
years.
he knew what was coming
Yeah.
for 7 years after. It's got to be with the attitude. It has to be with the attitude.
Yeah.
Because God, blessed him.
Yeah.
Yielded plenty.
Yeah.
I look at Bezos, I look at all these rich people, and they have more zeros than they'll ever be able to use. And it's like Michael Jackson, for instance. How long has he been dead? He still makes more money than any other musician.
20 years
How is that
almost, yeah.
possible? Because of it just rolls.
Yeah.
And yet, I understand that, the selfishness of it. And yet, just like us, we don't know what day we're going to be,
Right.
Required of God to come and be with Him.
Right.
But, just hard
Right.
to look at the positive negatives of this one parable.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really,
Right.
go more into depth on it.
Yeah, but it does leave us with verse 21, which it's really powerful, because I'm really happy that we have verse 21, because verse 21 says, "So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." And that begs the question, what does it mean to be rich towards God? That's what I want to be. I don't want to just build riches for myself in heaven. There's a book that I just purchased. It's called Die with Zero. Talk about storing things and developing. Die with zero means, whatever the blessings that God gives you, just make sure that you use it in a way to give God the glory, right? Don't just die and have a lot of toys that your kid's gonna fight for your inheritance. Idea is be wise about it so that you leave a legacy, and you live your life in a way so that you glorify God with what you have, with what God blessed you, and therefore to become rich towards God. Because what's the point to be rich as far as the bank accounts and all that, but if you are broke with God, right? Mark?
Do you think that that's the lesson in the story, is that the guy having riches was not the problem? It was the fact that he was like, "Good job, soul. I've done my job. Now I can retire." He didn't give any glory to God or any glory to anyone else but himself. He was just like, "Okay, I'm going to live off what I did because I did this and
Yeah.
I deserve it." And that's the problem.
That's precisely the problem, is when your possession own you. Look at Abraham. We just talked about Abraham. Abraham was one of the richest men who ever lived. I don't know how much money he would have had in today's, if you multiply times how many thousands of years. But he was a super, super wealthy person. And he was the father of faith. He was one of the most faithful, but his possessions did not hold him back. On contrary, his faith was so huge that when God says, "Go and kill your son," says, "No problem," because he trusted in his God, and God was really what all there was to him. God blessed him, and he's not the only one that God blesses. God blesses all of us. God blesses all of us. All of us. We are richly blessed, every one of us. And if you don't think so, you might want to research about Zimbabwe and Botswana and some other countries that they live off $1 a day, and they don't have running water, and so we are very much a blessed people. Of course, we can compare and we talk about, well, what about Jeff Bezos? What about this? What about that? These people have billions of dollars. But you know what? We are also very, very blessed. But to answer your question, Mark, yes, precisely was because his riches own him. It was not about God. He was not rich towards God. He was rich just having stuff. Right?
How would you define covetousness?
Covetousness? So covetousness is wanting what's not yours, what you shouldn't have.
The reason I'm asking that
Yeah.
is because he says, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Now, wanting more is bad when you have the desire to go about it in any way, shape, or form. And I would just wonder, this parable falls after this.
Yeah.
And it is in a direct result. So this man didn't want what somebody else had, but now that he has what he has, he's going to build bigger barns. What would he have done if he didn't build bigger barns?
He could have given it away, some, feed the poor. He didn't have to build bigger rich.
Yeah, we don't know if he did that already or not.
It's true. However, the key of the parable here, that Jesus identified that this person really had an issue with covetousness, right? And obviously he was not rich towards God. And what does it mean to be rich towards God? Because he was not rich towards God. What makes you rich towards God? Maybe that's what we should be talking about. How, Marcus?
Giving God the glory.
One, giving God the glory. Oh, thank you, God, for this is wonderful. What else? That's not it. Excuse me? Treating your neighbor as yourself. Yes. So what is that? How? Make it practical for us. Helping people around you. Yes.
Paul wrote to the Ephesians and he cleared it all up. He says, Don't live as the world lives, but rather he must have something to share with one who has need. And he was talking about performing works with your own hands. Work
Yes.
so you
Yes.
can help the people
Yes.
who have need.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so what's the most important thing? It's your spiritual condition.
Yeah.
It's how you gear yourself in this world
Yeah.
to help the spiritual condition of the other people around you. That's the whole purpose of life.
Right.
It's not about stuff or anything else. It's about getting to heaven.
Right, right. And really, at the end of the day, it boils down to mindset, because that's really where the cancer is. If the person's mindset it's about me, right, and not about others, and it's just gonna be. It says, just take your ease, drink, and be merry. It's all about you. If you make it about you, your mindset is off. We can make it, if you make it about you and everything you have is about you and you don't think about God, you don't think about others, then guess what? You are poor and broke towards God. Right? Barrett?
So anytime you start talking about it, it's justification. Well, it's not wrong to work. No, you missed the point.
Yeah.
Or it's well, I'm supposed to relax and go on vacation. No, you missed the point. The whole point isn't even that. It's
Yeah.
where your directive is.
Yeah.
What is your purpose in life? It's
Yeah.
to help people get to heaven. That's it.
Yeah. To make a difference and to go back to what Red mentioned earlier, it's not wrong to work. We better all have to work. Work hard, all that, but it's just where your mindset is, who you give the glory to. Whenever when God blesses you, you're going to use your blessings to bless those around you, or you're just going to use it for yourself. So anyways, let's think about this. We're going to take a break now. I'll come back for worship at 11. Thank you.